I was standing in the fellowship hall of St. Luke's Church when my stepdaughter said it out loud, clear as a bell, with her chin up and her eyes locked on mine. The greatest gift for my wedding, she said, would be if you disappeared from our family forever. The room went quiet. Folding chairs, white tablecloths, a half-empty tray of sugar cookies. I waited for my wife to laugh it off. I waited for her to say something. She didn't. Karen nodded. That was the moment. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a small, ordinary nod that felt like a door closing somewhere deep inside my chest. 3 weeks later, they would be standing in the same hall, voices raised, faces red, staring at an empty house and asking how everything could fall apart so fast. But back then in that quiet room, all I did was breathe in and count to 3. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I just looked at Emily, 28 years old, hair in a tight bun wedding binder, pressed to her chest like a shield, and I said, "All right." She blinked like she hadn't expected that. Now let me back up a little. My name is Tom Gallagher. I was 56 years old that spring, living in Maple Grove, Minnesota. I'd been an electrician most of my life. 34 years of early mornings, cold basements, and hands that never quite stopped buzzing, even when I tried to sleep. My knuckles were thick, my fingers half numb from years of crimping wires and tightening screws. Karen and I had been married 12 years. She came with a daughter, Emily, who was 16 when I met her. Her real father was long gone. I didn't try to replace him. I just showed up. School pickups, flat tires, driver's ed practice in the high school parking lot. I taught her how to parallel park in my old Ford F-150, my foot hovering over the brake, my voice calm, even when she hit the curb. She used to call me Tom, then Dad, then somewhere along the line, she stopped calling me anything at all. Our house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac with crab apple trees and mailboxes shaped like little barns. I'd put the down payment on it. My name was on the mortgage. Karen's too. Emily liked to call it the family home, especially when she talked about hosting bridal showers and pre-wedding dinners there. The wedding had taken over everything. Venues, caterers, florists. Emily's voice on speakerphone while Karen paced the kitchen, nodding, smiling, saying, "Of course, sweetheart." I paid most of it without complaint. That's what you do, I told myself. You invest in the people you love. The meeting at the church was supposed to be simple. Final head count, seating plan, who was sitting where. Emily stood at the front with her binder flipping pages like a project manager. Then she cleared her throat. "There's just one more thing," she said, looking at Karen first, then at me. "I don't want any awkwardness on my wedding day." Karen shifted in her chair. I knew that shift. She did it when she didn't want to choose sides. Emily went on. "People might get confused. I mean, you're not really my dad." I nodded once. That part didn't sting as much as she probably thought. And honestly, she said it would mean a lot if you just stepped back. Like completely. I waited. She took a breath and finished it. "The greatest gift would be if you disappeared from our family forever." I turned to Karen. 12 years of marriage, shared bank accounts, quiet Sunday mornings. I searched her face for something, anything. She nodded. I remember noticing how loud the clock on the wall sounded after that. Tick, tick, tick. "All right," I said again. That night I packed a small duffel bag, jeans, work shirts, my toothbrush. I left the rest. Family photos, the couch I'd fixed twice, the garage shelves I built with my own hands. Karen watched from the bedroom doorway. "Tom," she said, like she might add something else. But she didn't. I left my house keys on the counter, next to the wedding binder. I slept in my truck that first night, parked behind a Perkins off Highway 94. The smell of bacon grease drifted out every time the door opened. I sat there with a cup of bad coffee, hands wrapped around it, staring at nothing. By morning, my phone was full of messages, missed calls, confused texts. Emily asking what I was trying to pull, Karen asking where I was. I didn't answer. Instead, I drove to work, pulled wire, tightened screws, did my job. The world didn't end just because my marriage had. During lunch, I sat in my truck and looked at the mortgage app on my phone. The payment I'd been making alone for years. The insurance policy in my name, the deed I'd signed without thinking much about it at the time. Disappear, I thought. All right. But disappearing didn't mean vanishing into thin air. It meant stepping out carefully and letting everything they leaned on feel the weight of that absence. I started my engine and drove toward town, toward an old real estate office with a faded sign I'd driven past 100 times before. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just done. I didn't go straight to the real estate office. I drove past it once, then circled the block, my blinker clicking, like it was keeping time with my thoughts. I wasn't shaking. That surprised me. I'd always assumed something like this would come with anger, heat yelling, maybe a cracked windshield or a slammed door. Instead, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped me out and forgotten to put anything back. I pulled into a gas station, filled the truck, and sat there longer than I needed to. An old guy at the next pump nodded at me. We exchanged the kind of look men our age share, no words, just acknowledgement. You still here? Still breathing? I checked my phone again. Another text from Karen. Tom, this has gone far enough. We need to talk. I typed back, erased it, typed again. Then I locked the screen and slid the phone into the console. Talking was what they'd done. Deciding without me, nodding. By mid-afternoon, I found myself parked outside the Maple Grove branch of North Star Credit Union. The brick building looked the same as it always had. Flags out front, a bench by the door. I'd been banking there since before Karen. Inside, the air smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and printer toner. A young woman at the counter smiled like she'd practiced it. Hi, how can I help you? I need to look at a few accounts, I said, joint ones. She nodded, tapped her keyboard, asked for my ID. Everything calm, ordinary. That was the strange part. Life kept moving like nothing had happened. We went through the paperwork, the checking account, the savings, the one we'd been using for wedding expenses. I didn't close anything yet. I just asked questions, took notes, listened. When I walked back out, I sat on the bench for a minute and watched cars come and go. A woman struggled to buckle a toddler into a car seat. Someone laughed too loud inside the building. I felt older than I had that morning. That night, I stayed in a cheap extended stay motel off the interstate. Beige walls, a bed that dipped in the middle. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about the house. The way the stairs creaked on the third step. The smell of Karen's shampoo lingering in the bathroom. I thought about Emily at 16 white-knuckling the steering wheel while I coached her through her first left turn. Easy, I'd said. You've got time. Had I? The next morning, I went back to the house while Karen was at work. I used the spare key I still had. Walked through rooms that suddenly felt staged, like I was trespassing in my own life. I packed a few more things. My toolbox, a framed photo of my dad, the old flannel jacket I wore every fall. I didn't touch anything that screamed Husband the Wedding album, the matching mugs, the throw blanket Karen liked. On the kitchen counter, the wedding binder sat exactly where I'd left it. Sticky notes, color tabs, everything organized to the minute. I closed it gently. By the time Karen got home that evening, my side of the closet was empty. She stood there with her arms crossed. You're really doing this, she said. I am, I replied. You're punishing us. I looked at her then. Really looked. The lines around her mouth, the way she avoided my eyes. No, I said, I'm stepping back, like you wanted. She opened her mouth, then shut it. Emily didn't mean. She meant it, I said, and you agreed. That was when her face changed. Not angry, not sad, just uncertain. Like she'd finally realized something was moving that she couldn't stop. Over the next few days, the calls escalated. Emily left voicemails that swung from furious to panicked. You can't just leave, she said in one. Do you know how this looks? Karen's messages were quieter. We can fix this. Please come home. You're hurting everyone. I didn't respond. Instead, I met with Dave Miller, a realtor I'd known for years. We sat in his small office, a pot of burnt coffee between us. You're serious, he asked, flipping through the paperwork. I am. He leaned back, studied me. Fast sale or? Fast, I said. Clean. Dave nodded. You know what that means. I do. Signing the listing agreement felt heavier than I expected. Not because I doubted it, but because it made everything final. The house would sell. The wedding plans tied to it would unravel. I knew that. That night, Karen showed up at the motel unannounced. She knocked until I answered. You're tearing everything down, she said, eyes bright. For what? I didn't raise my voice. For myself. She laughed, then sharp and brittle. You think this will end well? I think it will end, honestly, I said. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe she didn't. The next morning, the for sale sign went up on the lawn. By afternoon, my phone exploded. Emily screamed. Karen cried. Someone from the wedding venue called confused, asking who still had authority to approve events at the house. I let it ring. Disappear, they'd said. I was doing exactly that quietly, legally, one piece at a time. And the more I stepped away, the more I realized how much of their world I'd been holding up without ever being thanked. That realization didn't feel like victory. Not yet. It felt like the ground shifting under everyone's feet, including mine. By the end of that week, I understood something I hadn't when I first packed my duffel bag. Disappearing wasn't a single act. It wasn't a slammed door or a dramatic goodbye. It was a series of quiet absences, small supports removed one at a time, like pulling nails out of a board and watching it finally sag under its own weight. The house went live on a Thursday. Dave texted me a photo of the listing. Bright pictures, wide angles. The lawn looked greener than I remembered. I stared at it for a long time, trying to feel something. Sharp regret, triumph, anything. But mostly I felt tired. That night I sat in the motel room with the TV on low, watching a weather forecast I didn't care about. My phone buzzed again. Karen Emily's in tears. She says you're humiliating her. I set the phone face down. A few minutes later it buzzed again. Karen, please, we can talk. Just come home. Home. The word felt loose now, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I thought about the first winter in that house. How I'd woken up early to shovel the driveway before work so Karen wouldn't slip. How I'd replaced the furnace myself to save money. How Emily had brought her friends over and laughed loud in the kitchen, never worrying about bills or heat or who made it all possible. The next morning I drove to the county records office in Brooklyn Park. It was a squat concrete building with fluorescent lights that made everyone look a little sick. I took a number and waited, listening to the hum of the air vents and the shuffle of paperwork. When my turn came, the clerk pulled up the deed on her screen. She read off the names. Mine came first. I nodded. That's what I thought. On the way out, I sat in my truck and rested my forehead against the steering wheel. For a second, just a second, I wondered if I was going too far. Then my phone rang. This time it was the wedding venue. Mr. Gallagher, a woman asked, polite but firm. We're calling because there seems to be some confusion about the property being used for the rehearsal dinner. There's no confusion, I said. The house is being sold. Silence on the line. Well, she said carefully, without confirmation from the homeowner and proof of insurance, we can't proceed. I understand, I replied. When I hung up, my hands were shaking, not with fear, with adrenaline, because now it was real. Now the consequences were moving beyond angry messages and hurt feelings. That afternoon, I went back to work. I climbed a ladder in a strip mall and rewired a lighting panel. My hands moved on autopilot. Strip, twist, cap. My body knew what to do, even when my mind didn't. During my break, I ate a dry turkey sandwich in my truck and watched a young couple argue in the parking lot. The woman waved her arms. The man stared at the ground. I wondered which one I'd been all these years. That evening, Emily texted me directly. You're ruining everything. You always do this. You make it about you. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. I thought about the night she'd called me from college crying because her car wouldn't start. I'd driven 2 hours in the snow to pick her up. Didn't even hesitate. You're my hero, she'd said back then, half joking, half not. I didn't reply. Instead, I called my insurance agent, a woman named Linda I'd worked with for years. She knew my voice. Tom, everything okay? I'm selling the house, I said. I need to make some changes. She walked me through it, professional and kind. By the end of the call, another thread had been quietly pulled loose. That night, Karen showed up again. This time, she didn't knock. She just stood outside my truck in the motel lot while I sat behind the wheel, the engine off. You're hurting Emily, she said through the open window. I didn't start this, I replied. You're her father. I said gently, until I wasn't. Her mouth tightened. You're enjoying this. I shook my head. I'm surviving it. She leaned closer. If you keep going, there's no coming back. I looked at her, really looked. You already decided that, I said. You just didn't think I'd accept it. She stepped back then, like I'd pushed her. The first offer on the house came in 2 days later, slightly under asking. Dave called me, voice cautious. We can counter. Accept it, I said. You sure? Yes. Hanging up, I felt a weight settle in my chest. Not dread, finality. Emily's wedding dress was still hanging in the spare bedroom closet. I knew that. I'd helped install the rod myself. I pictured it there untouched, waiting for a day that was slipping further out of reach with every signature I signed. That night alone in the motel, I pulled an old photo from my wallet. Emily at 17 sitting in the driver's seat of my truck, grinning like she just won something. I sat there for a long time listening to the hum of the vending machine down the hall. Disappearing, I realized, wasn't about punishment. It was about letting go of the illusion that love once given would always be returned. And once I saw that, clearly there was no turning back. The sale closed on a Tuesday morning. I know because I remember the sound the pen made when I signed the last page. A soft scratch. Nothing dramatic. Dave slid the papers toward me, tapped the corner into a neat stack, and said, "That's it. That's it. 12 years of mortgage payments. 12 winters of shoveling. 12 summers of mowing that lawn while Emily sat on the porch scrolling her phone, asking if I'd seen her sunglasses. Gone." I walked out of the title office into a parking lot full of ordinary cars. A minivan honked somewhere. A man argued with his phone. Life kept moving, unaware that something I'd built was officially no longer mine. Dave clapped me lightly on the shoulder. "You all right?" "I will be," I said. I believed that, mostly. The call started before I reached the end of the block. Karen first. "What did you do?" she demanded, breathless. "I sold the house." "You can't." "I did." She went quiet, then softer. "The wedding venue just called me." "I figured they would." "They canceled a rehearsal dinner," she said. "They said they can't move forward without the property." I pictured Emily's binder, the color tabs, the timelines planned down to the minute. I pictured her standing in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it in the only way that still mattered. "You're destroying her dream," Karen said. "No," I replied, "I'm stepping out of it." By afternoon, the florist canceled. The band followed. The caterer left a voicemail asking who was now responsible for the outstanding balance. Emily called me from a number I didn't recognize. I answered before I could stop myself. "You sold the house," she yelled. "Are you insane?" "I warned you I was disappearing," I said calmly. "You did this on purpose." "Yes." There it was, the truth finally out in the open. "You're ruining my wedding," she cried. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I almost saw her as she'd been at 8 years old, holding my hand in the mall parking lot, afraid of getting lost. "This isn't revenge," I said. "It's consequences." She hung up. That evening, Karen came to the motel again. She sat on the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped, staring at the carpet. "She's embarrassed," she said. "Everyone knows." "Everyone knew I existed too," I replied, "until they didn't want me to." She looked up, then eyes red. "I never thought you'd go this far." "I never thought you'd nod," I said. The room went still. 2 days later, the buyers scheduled an open house for the weekend. Yard signs, balloons tied to the mailbox, strangers walking through rooms where my life had happened. Emily showed up during one of the showings. I wasn't there, but the neighbors told me later. Voices raised, doors slammed, a woman crying on the front steps while people pretended not to look. That night, my phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. "Tom, it's Rick from next door. Just checking in. Didn't seem right, you not being around." I stared at that text longer than I should have. A neighbor noticed my absence before my own family did. The wedding was officially postponed the following Monday. Postponed, they said, like it might come back if they waited long enough. Emily posted a vague message online about toxic people and setting boundaries. Karen stopped texting altogether. I moved out of the motel and into a small rental on the edge of town. 1 bedroom, thin walls, a porch just big enough for a chair. The first night there, I sat in that chair and listened to the hum of traffic. No shouting, no wedding plans, no binder, just quiet. But the quiet didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. I knew they thought the story was over, that I'd made my point and would now fade into the background like they'd wanted. They were wrong. Because while the house was empty, something else was taking shape. Something I'd been building slowly, deliberately over long nights and early mornings. I wasn't leaving chaos behind. I was leaving the truth. And soon they would have no choice but to open the door and face it. The buyers took possession on a Friday morning. I didn't go to the house while they moved in. I didn't need to. I'd already been there earlier that week alone, with the room stripped bare and the air smelling faintly of dust and lemon cleaner. I walked through once slow touching nothing, listening to my footsteps echo like I was in someone else's memory. I brought one box. It wasn't heavy, just paper. I set it on the kitchen counter right where Karen used to lay out bills and Emily spread her binders. The counter still had a faint scratch from the time I dropped a screwdriver years ago. I'd meant to sand it down, never got around to it. The box held a single binder, black thick, the kind accountants use. On the spine in block letters I'd written, "What disappears?" Inside were tabs, clean, labeled. Mortgage payments, insurance and utilities, education and medical wedding expenses, extras. Each section held copies, checks, statements, notes in my handwriting, dates, amounts. No opinions, no insults. Just facts. On top of the binder, I placed a single envelope addressed to Emily. Not Karen. Emily. I stood there for a long time after setting it down. Long enough to hear a car pass outside. Long enough to feel the weight of the years settle in my shoulders. Then I left. I didn't tell anyone I'd been there. The call came that afternoon. It wasn't Karen. It was Emily's fiancé, Mark. I'd met him twice. Polite, quiet, the kind of man who let things happen around him and called it peace. "What is this?" he asked, voice tight. "Open it," I said. There was a pause, papers shifting, a sharp breath. "Jesus," he muttered. Karen must have been there too. I could hear her crying in the background. Emily's voice rose sharp and panicked. "This is manipulative," she said. "He planned this." I took the phone off speaker and held it to my ear. "I documented it," I said. "There's a difference." "You're trying to embarrass us," Karen sobbed. "I'm telling the truth," I replied, publicly for the first time. They were in the house then? The empty one. Neighbors drifting past. The new owners not due until the next day. The kitchen wide open, sunlight spilling over the counter where the binder lay. I imagined Emily flipping through it, her finger stopping on numbers she'd never noticed before. The $1,250 monthly mortgage payment, the 4.2% interest rate I'd locked in 12 years earlier, the $600 to $800 for braces, the $14 now $900 venue deposit, the florist, the band, the alterations, all paid from the same account. Under extras, I'd added a few things she'd forgotten. Gas money from college trips home, insurance deductibles, the winter I covered her rent when her roommate bailed. At the end of the binder was the letter. Not long. Just one page. "Emily, you asked me to disappear. This is what disappears when I do. There's no anger in this, just accounting. I hope your wedding day is still beautiful. I won't be there to see it. Tom." I could hear Mark breathing on the line, slow and heavy. "Did you know about all this?" he asked Emily. Silence. That silence was louder than any yelling could have been. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk. Rick from next door stood with his arms crossed, pretending to check his phone while clearly listening. Someone whispered. Someone else shook their head. Karen's voice cracked. "Tom, please, you've made your point." "I didn't make a point," I said. "I answered a request." Emily screamed then, not words, just sound, raw and furious. The phone went dead. Later, I heard what happened next from Rick. Emily threw the binder across the room. Pages spilled. Numbers fluttered like leaves. Mark picked them up, one by one. The neighbors watched from a polite distance the way Midwesterners do, concerned, curious, restrained. A woman from across the street said, "I always thought Tom paid for everything." Rick nodded. He did. By evening, the story had spread. Church friends, wedding guests, people who'd wondered why the wedding was suddenly postponed. There was no rumor to correct. The truth was already labeled, tabbed, and laid out on the counter. Karen tried calling me again that night. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat on the porch of my small rental, a folding chair pulled close to the railing. The sun dipped low, turning the sky the color of rusted copper. Somewhere, a lawnmower droned. A dog barked once, then settled. For the first time in weeks, my hands weren't shaking. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean. The next morning, an email arrived from Mark. "I didn't know. I'm sorry. I don't think we're ready to get married." I read it twice, then I closed the laptop. Karen sent one final message later that day. "I wish you'd fought harder." I typed back one sentence. "I did, quietly, for years. That was the last thing I ever said to her. By Sunday, the binder was gone. The new owners had moved in. The counter was theirs now, but the story had already done its work. You can't put numbers back once they're read. You can't unsee the weight someone carried when it's finally set down in public. They asked me to disappear. What shocked them wasn't that I left. It was how much vanished with me. I didn't hear from them for a long time after that. Weeks passed, then months. The kind of months where the seasons shift quietly and you don't notice until the air feels different on your skin. Summer slid into fall. Leaves gathered along the curb outside my rental, curling and browning, like they were tired of holding on. I settled into a rhythm. I woke up at 5:30 every morning, same as I had for years. The coffee maker was old and loud, but it worked. I drank my first cup standing by the window watching headlights move along the road like a slow river. Some mornings I missed the house, the garage, the way the sun hit the kitchen table just right around 7. Other mornings I didn't. Work stayed steady. My hands still buzzed at night, but I slept better than I had in years. No wedding deadlines. No tension humming through the walls. Just quiet, honest tiredness. One afternoon in October, Rick stopped by. He'd tracked down my new address through a mutual friend. He stood on my porch with his hands in his jacket pockets, shifting his weight. Just wanted to say he began, then paused. A lot of folks saw what you did. I waited. Not the selling part, he said. The other part, the binder, the truth. I nodded. They don't talk about it much, he went on, but they noticed. After he left, I sat back down in my chair and looked out at the trees. For the first time, I understood something I'd been too busy to see before. Respect doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly after everything else falls away. Karen tried one last time near Thanksgiving. She showed up at my door without calling, coat pulled tight, eyes tired. I didn't think you'd really go through with it, she said. I did, I replied. She looked past me into the small living room, the second-hand couch, the lamp I'd fixed myself, the place that belonged only to me. You seem different, she said. I am. She nodded then, the same small nod. But this one didn't hurt. It didn't matter anymore. I hope you're happy, she said. I'm at peace, I answered. She left without another word. That winter, I bought a place of my own, smaller than the old house, paid for outright, a modest porch, a yard just big enough to rake without cursing. On the first night there, I sat outside with a mug of tea and watched the sun sink behind the trees. No applause, no audience, just quiet. I thought about Emily sometimes, not with anger, with a distant kind of sadness. I hope she learned something. I hope she didn't have to lose as much as I did to understand it. But that part wasn't mine anymore. What I took with me wasn't money or property or even vindication. I took my dignity. I took my time. I took the truth of who I was and who I'd been all along. They asked me to disappear. What they never understood was this: when you push someone out who's been holding everything together, you don't just lose them. You lose the weight they carried in silence. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever felt unseen, taken for granted, or quietly erased, know this: you're not alone. Sometimes the strongest response isn't shouting back. Sometimes it's choosing yourself. If this story resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this one, told honestly and without noise, take a moment to subscribe. Thank you for listening.